It has now been more than 12 weeks since the initial blast at block number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. To stop the deadly contamination, the final attack is launched. Construction of a massive sarcophagus that will completely cover the damaged reactor. Radioactivity in this sector is so high that only remote-controlled machines can be sent in. But people will have to get the machines into position. Workers can only stay a few minutes without receiving a fatal dose of radiation. With each second, their lives are more threatened.
Here's one of the armored vehicles. It looks primitive, but we had to build them ourselves. We lined the cabs entirely with lead to protect our soldiers from the radiation as best we could.
Each metallic piece of the structure is prefabricated, sometimes hundreds of miles away, then brought one by one onto the site for assembly. An extraordinary jigsaw puzzle. Beams 150 tons and 230 feet long, buttresses 150 feet high. Despite the extreme conditions, work progresses. 130,000 cubic yards of cement are used to make the structure. But the discovery of a new problem forces the work to a halt. The roof of the plant is covered with highly contaminated pieces of graphite.
Это будет примерно 1000. Вот около вот этого колпака примерно 200. Все, пойдемте. На сегодня хватит нам. Выходим, пойдемте. И ты тоже выходи оттуда.
These pieces of graphite enveloped uranium rods. They've been blown from the reactor during the explosion. One single piece gives off enough radioactivity to kill a man in less than an hour. They have to be gotten rid of before construction continues. Robots are sent onto the roof to shove the lethal debris over the edge. 200 feet below, other robots gather it up and bury it in ditches. But after a few days, the ambient radioactivity begins to affect even the machines. Their electronic circuitry can't hold up. They break down. One of them hurtles itself into the breach. Robotic machines are no longer an option. Men will have to replace them. Russian soldiers nicknamed biorobots for the occasion. This battalion of young soldiers is preparing to go up onto the roof of the third reactor for the first time. They're between 20 and 30 years old. All of them reservists called to the front for the most dangerous and deadly battle of Chernobyl. No human has ever worked in zones as radioactive as this. General Nikolai Tarakanov is in command of the operation and personally oversees every detail, down to the hand-sewn lead suits that every soldier is forced to make the night before the attack.
On their fronts, on their backs, in their boots, they were covered in lead. A helmet, a mask to protect against beta rays. The whole uniform weighed 26 to 30 kilos.
When the siren blows, a crew of 8 soldiers rushes up onto the roof along with an officer. Their mission is simple: shovel up the radioactive debris as quickly as possible and throw it off the roof. According to General Tarakanov's calculations, the level of radioactivity, estimated to be 7,000 Roentgens per hour, only allows the biorobots 45 seconds on the roof, only enough time for a couple of shovelfuls.
We were like ants. Just as some were finishing their task, others would immediately take their place. Everyone did their job, no matter how small it was. And that's how together we were able to fight the radioactivity.
For 10 days, a new crew of biorobots climbs onto the roof every 10 minutes. According to military personnel, 3,500 people participate in the cleanup. Some, like Igor Kostin and Konstantin Fedotov, went up on the roof 5 times.
We picked up pieces that were 1,500 rongens. After a day of work, our hands would ache, and we could not make a fist.
The first time I went up on the roof, the whole thing was covered in radioactive waste. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what world I was in, and I started snapping photos. If you look close, you can see traces of radiation on the film. I was holding the camera like this, and it was coming up from the ground, like that.
Your eyes hurt, and there was a metal taste in your mouth. Those are the two things you felt. And once you felt that, you knew you had gotten more than your dose.
You went like this, but you couldn't hear anything. Everything was covered in lead. Even today, 20 years later, I can still taste the lead in my mouth.
Thousands of them will discover that this peculiar taste means an invisible enemy is attacking. As the biorobots are sacrificing their lives on the roof of the plant, the cleanup continues throughout the 19-mile zone, 24 hours a day, rain or shine.
Well, normally it would take one man 1 hour to do a job. Here in Chernobyl, it took 60 people.
When we came down off the roof, it felt like our blood had been sucked dry by vampires. We were drained. We could not move. Some people would have nosebleeds. The firemen were right there. If someone's nose started bleeding, they got sent to the hospital. If we collapsed, we got sent home. But we wanted to hold out. But at that time, we were young and strong. Our health is shot. We've lost everything. When they sent all those people up onto the roof, no one knew exactly the actual level of radiation. Now we know it was between 10,000 and 12,000 arongens per hour. At that level of radioactivity, people never should have been sent.
7 months after the explosion, the zone has been cleaned up and the sarcophagus completed. 500,000 people, military and civilian, have participated in the operation.
Our sarcophagus is a pantheon, a tomb, a mausoleum. Our second mausoleum. After that, we stopped building nuclear power plants.
A bitter victory from which the country will never recover.